Okay. In this week's Parsha, Vayakel, there is a difference between those whose hearts motivates them and every wise-hearted person. Those whose hearts motivates them what gifts to Hashem that are to be used inside the tabernacle. Then every wise-hearted person came and made the foundation of the tabernacle and the utensils that are to be used inside the tabernacle. They also made the vestments for Aaron the Kohen and the vestments for his sons to minister in. In this week's Parsha, it also says, every man whose heart inspired him and whose spirit motivated him. Why does the Torah begin with the person, then refer to the person as a man? It then says that for every man whose heart motivated them, brought along their wives. A man whose heart motivates them makes a great husband. Vayakel then shows every wise-hearted woman worked with their hands. Then the woman whose heart inspired them spun goat hair. This shows that men and women can work with each other. Every man and every woman whose heart motivated them brought a free-willed offering to Hashem. And that's mine.
Okay, Shia. Very nice.
Thank you.
That's a good introduction. Okay, good morning. So that's a very good introduction of men and women working together. However, sometimes, unfortunately, men and women can't get along. And that leads to sometimes divorce when it happens with a married couple. And that's what I want to talk about this morning a little bit in terms of dissolving a marriage and how one goes about doing that. Anybody who hasn't been living in a cave understands that people can sometimes get along and people can sometimes not get along. People can disagree on a whole range of things. And especially true in terms of husband and wife. And the Torah understands that. And that's why the Torah says, unlike other religions which do not allow marriage to be dissolved by divorce, Torah recognizes if in some cases the two people can't get along, then according to the Torah, the husband must give a wife a get of his own free will, and the marriage is dissolved. What if, however, and by the way, a few other just side issues to keep in mind. First of all, biblically, you could have more than one wife, which might resolve some problems, although it could create other problems. It's in a fascinating comment. The relationship of co-wives in Tanakh is referred to as sarot, which is an interesting word. Yiddish is, I think, is the only language, perhaps, I think maybe Spanish, I'm not sure, Spanish also, but Yiddish is unique in that it has special words for in-laws, special words, different relationships, whereas the relationship between two co-wives is sarot. I don't think any other language has that connotation. In any event, According to the Torah, a husband may divorce his wife, and he gives her the get, which is the bill of divorce. And according to the Torah, this has to be done without any duress of his own free will. If there's any coercion, then that invalidates the whole procedure. And this is a very, very important halacha because it plays out today in many unfortunate circumstances. The Beis Din, the local court of Jewish law, is faced with a problem. What happens if a husband does not want to give his wife a divorce? Now, again, up until the 10th century, up until Rabbeinu Gershon came on the scene, the Torah says a couple of things. A, he divorces her, number one. Number two, he can even divorce her against her will. If he doesn't want to be married anymore, and she does, she has no choice in the matter. Rabbeinu Gershon comes up, and in a radical move, you have to understand that for a rabbi to go against the Torah is a very radical thing. How do you go against the Torah? Well, Rabbeinu Gershon has such stature as the chief rabbi of pretty much all of Ashkenazic Jewry. And just as a footnote, we're not really sure where he came from. We know where Rashi's teachers came from. They were students of Rabbeinu Gershon. But where did Rabbeinu Gershon come from? We're not really quite sure. Some surmise he may have come from Bavel, whatever. We're not quite sure. Professor Chaim Soloveitchik suggests that he may have come from one of the yeshivas in Bavel. There's a fourth unknown yeshiva. There's Shura, Papadisa, Machoza, and there's a fourth yeshiva that's not known about. And that must be where Rabbeinu Gershon came from. We're not really quite sure. But in any event, he had such stature that he was able to initiate a number of decrees that apparently seemed to go against the Torah. Number one, you may not divorce a wife against her will. Major chiddush. Number two, you can't have more than one wife. These are two radical innovations that would seem to go contrary to the Torah. Yet he was able to do that. And I should say, just as a side note, that in Ashkenazic Jewry, they valued women on a very, very high level. And if you look at ancient ketubot from that period of time, they increased the value of the Tosfot Kesuba, so to speak, the amount of money that she would get in the event of a death or divorce, because they valued women that much. So Rabbeinu Gershon elevated the position of women by preventing divorce against her will, because a woman on her own would be very difficult to survive in those times, the 11th century. And number two, you can't divorce her against her will, and you can only have one wife. Major chidushim. Problem still exists, though. What happens? Yeah. Pelegesh is really a biblical institution where you had a number of concubines that were not complete wives in a legal sense. And the Torah allows you to have that. Again, the Torah is a product of the Middle East. And lives then and customs then were very, very different than they were later on in Europe. I don't recall if he outright did that, but you don't have a case. You had cases of it in these Muslim countries. In Spain, you had situations like that. In Morocco, you had that, but not necessarily in Europe. In Europe, you didn't have that. It was a very, again, Christian Europe, the Muslim countries were very, very different in their outlook towards that. But in any event, the problem is what happens, and we'll talk specifically about Europe when a husband does not want to divorce his wife? Well, she can't get remarried. If a woman is technically married and not divorced, she remains an aguna. She cannot get remarried. Now, there are situations which are very difficult. I mean, what happens, for example, again, Middle Ages, if a husband was captured and held prisoner by some foreign power, or became mentally ill and didn't have the competency to issue a get. You know, these are very serious problems where the woman can't get, and a woman can't have more than one husband. It doesn't work because you never know who the father of the child is. Polyandry is certainly prohibited. But how do you deal with a situation if a husband does not want to give a get to his wife? So the aguna situation is very serious. And a few hundred years after Rabbeinu Gershom, along comes Rabbeinu Tam. Rabbeinu Tam was the grandson of Rashi. So you're talking 250 years after Rabbeinu Gershom. And he also, they used to have these communal ordinances. They would get together once a year and go over major issues, and the rabbis would issue proclamations. So Rabbeinu Tam, among the things that he did, he issued something called the Harchokos to Rabbeinu Tam. I don't know how you translate Harchokos. Distancing methods. It's a poor translation. But basically, he outlined a whole series of things that you could do to encourage the husband to divorce his wife. Now, encourage is a very important word. A get issued under coercion is invalid. If you coerce a husband and he can't give a get of his own free will, then the get is invalid. The Rambam is fascinating. The Rambam lived in Muslim countries and reflects the Muslim temperament. And on the one hand, the Rambam says that you can smack your wife around if she doesn't behave. You know, tune her up a little bit, get her on the straight and narrow. You can do that, which apparently was done in Muslim countries. On the other hand, when he writes about divorce, and the halacha is you cannot coerce a divorce, you must give a get of your own free will. The language he uses is beautiful. He says, "Makin oso at sheyomer rotza ani." You beat him up until he says, "Okay, I'll do it willingly." That's the Rambam, and that engenders a whole discussion among the poskim. When is coercion not coercion? In other words, what measures can you use to encourage somebody to give a divorce that is not considered coercive? I remember, and there was a group of people, I think Karl and Stoll and Hasidim, who used to encourage husbands to divorce their wives who were very recalcitrant, shall we say. And they were very successful in what they did. And then they decided, we're so successful and we've been getting so many people to divorce their wives, quote unquote, willingly, we're going to charge for this service. And unfortunately, that's when the police got involved. It was a big mistake. However, I remember many years ago, when I was a principal, some of the best teachers I had came from the Beis Yaakov Seminary. And it was a young girl, daughter of a prominent rabbi in Muncie, must have been 18, 19 years old. And she got married. A lovely outdoor wedding. The next morning, she ran home to her mother. This is not what I expected it to be. This guy is Nishvi Alaman. There's something wrong with him. Now, this is a separate discussion, perhaps for another shiur. You know, how honest do you have to be when somebody asks you about a prospective chassan? Do you have to describe him with all the warts and everything? You know, how honest, because you don't want to share the shidduch. How honest do you have to be? That's a separate discussion. But apparently, everybody knew about this guy, but nobody wanted to say anything. He also came from a prominent family. And so I said to her, listen, let me see what I can do. I'll help you out. But whatever you do, don't talk to any lawyers, please. I had a friend who was well-connected, shall we say. He wrote a book called The Last Jewish Gangster. He was in the slot machine. Anyway, whatever his background was, but he was connected. And he was going to get some fellows to meet with his husband and tell him, listen, you have a choice. Your wife can be a widow or a divorcee. It's up to you. That's what he said to him. But he was going, but he didn't get the chance because before I could arrange it, the family spoke to an attorney, and it cost them thousands and thousands of dollars they couldn't afford to get this guy to give again. It's a horrible situation. So the machlokes that exists today is, when is coercion not coercion? What things are you allowed to do today, 2026? What can you do to encourage people to give a divorce of their own free will? And there are a number of things. And Rabbi Tam lists a whole bunch of things that you could do in terms of distancing a person from the community. Don't count them in a minyan. Don't give them an aliyah. Some of these things would seem to be fairly strict. Let's see. Don't talk to him. Don't do business with him. Don't host him. What else is there? Let's see. Don't give him food and drink. Don't visit him when he's sick. Also, it's really, don't do a bris milah for his sons, and don't bury him. These are very strict things to encourage the guy. And if people knew this is what's going to happen, they will be encouraged, quote unquote, to divorce their wives if they are recalcitrant. Yes.
I hear what you're saying, but every week in the Jewish press, they have that whole list.
Yes.
Some going back years, and these jerks still have not given a get,
Okay.
and they're probably having a lovely, lovely
Right.
life somewhere.
So here, you're right. And this is why just publishing a list of people who received what they call a seruv, a summons to divorce your wife, just publishing is not sufficient. And if it's known, call up the guy's boss. This guy is a no goodnik. There are things you could do. Don't extend credit to him in the local supermarket. There are things that, and the Batei Dinim perhaps could be more proactive. I know that in Bergen County, several times, they organized pickets around somebody's home who wouldn't divorce his wife. They protested in front of his house. There are things you could do, and that are not considered, again, based on Rabbeinu Tam, that are not considered coercion. The community has this responsibility, and if they don't do it, then shame on them. Shame on them, because today it's very hard for a single woman with children. Now, in New York City, we're very fortunate, due to a certain amount to the efforts of the late David Stern, Oliver Shalom, who used to be a member of our shul. There's something called the New York Get Law, whereas if you apply for a secular divorce and you are an Orthodox Jew, then you cannot receive your secular divorce unless you give a get. That's a major accomplishment. And Rav Moshe Feinstein had to rule on that, saying that this is not considered illegal coercion. It's persuasion. I mean, again, you're finessing words. It's perhaps.
How is that helpful? Because assuming.
Well, that he can't get remarried. If he's not divorced.
Oh, he will. Okay.
If he won't give a Jewish divorce to his wife, he cannot get legally remarried in New York State. Outside New York State, perhaps, but not in New York State, you can't get remarried. So again, now, because this is a very fine line, not everybody agreed with Rav Moshe about this. The Chazon Ish, for example, was opposed to the whole notion of all of these harchokos of Rabbeinu Tam. And he was very, you're dealing with the mitzvah d'oraisa, and he was very, very concerned about it. However, the majority of poskim today follow Rav Moshe's lead, and the Beis Din of America, the RCA Beis Din, follows it as well. Don't give the guy an aliyah, don't count him in a minyan. There are a number of things that can be done. The question is how forceful the rabbis want to be. In Israel, for example, they're very strict about it. Guys went to jail because he wouldn't give his wife a divorce. They sat in jail for a long time, and he wouldn't give his wife a divorce. In Israel today, renewing passports, getting driver's licenses, all these things can be withheld from a non-compliant spouse. Can't leave the country. Can't take out funds from a bank account. There are things that the court, the Beis Din, has been allowed to do to encourage people to give a divorce. Demonstrations, these are all within the category of Harchokos Rabbeinu Tam. The local Batei Dinim, you'll take out ads like the Jewish press to take out a list of people. Rav Herschel Schechter is very much in favor of public protests against people. I remember in Toronto once, there was a guy who didn't give his wife a divorce. And when he went to the mikveh, Erev Shabbos, comes out of the mikveh and all his clothes were gone. They try to send him a message. There are specific things that you can do. And it's an unfortunate, you can't play around too much with a mitzvah d'oraisa. Giving a get is a biblical mitzvah. Parameters for how you give a get, how you encourage somebody to give a get, there's a very fine line as to what's considered coercion or what's permissible within the boundaries of Harchokos Rabbeinu Tam. In other words, we want a person to do what's right, but we can't compel him. We can influence him. And the difference between compelling and influencing is the machlokes between the Chazon Ish and Rav Moshe Feinstein in terms of what's permissible. Clearly, we don't want to have women remain agunot. That's a very, very important thing. And when there are agunot in our community, now there are some situations that are very, very difficult. For example, if you have a woman who, let's say, becomes ill, and she's hospitalized for a long period of time, physical illness, not much you can do about that. If a woman, unfortunately, becomes mentally ill, and she is institutionalized, and there's no way she's going to get better, and this happens when she's quite young, and the husband has a couple of young kids, and the wife is in a mental institution, and she's not getting out, she's going to die there at some point in the future, what do? He can't get remarried. She is not mentally competent to receive a get.
So what happened?
Huh?
So then what happened?
Okay, so there is an institution called Heter Meya Rabbanim, where you get the signatures of 100 rabbis who agree that this woman is not capable of effecting a legal get, and the get can be issued on her behalf. They act as her representatives. Again, it doesn't happen too often, but there is because technically, other than Rabbeinu Gershom, you can have more than one wife, technically. We don't do it anymore, but technically, so again, there's a lot of legalities involved there in that particular scenario. But the area of marriage and divorce are very, very important halachos. There's a whole section of Shulchan Aruch just devoted to that, Even Ezer. There are a lot of technicalities in how you write a divorce and the get and how it's delivered and how many lines it has. I know that my wife once accompanied a friend of hers to the RCA when she was receiving a get. And it's a whole procedure because you're dealing with mitzvahs d'oraisa when you have to be very, very careful about it. So in any event, the takeaway from this morning's discussion is, number one, that Rabbeinu Gershom was the first one to modify the biblical requirement of giving a get. It was further enhanced by Rabbeinu Tam 200 years later in terms of encouraging a husband as much as possible without causing coercion, very fine line, to make sure the wife is protected. And the ksuba is really part of the get, because when you divorce a wife, she collects a certain amount from the ksuba, and today it may not be worth all that much. A little, I don't know how many 200 pieces of silver are worth today in the ksuba, but in the Middle Ages they increased it 10, 20, 100 times more than that because they valued women that much. And a person was wealthy, he increased it, to several thousand pieces of silver in the event of death or divorce. So it's a lien against the estate. Well, all these are very, very important halachos. And when you have a situation today where a husband does not want to give his wife a get, the local rabbis, the local Beit Din, it was the RCBC or the RCA, whoever it might be, they have the capacity to encourage the husband, whether it's through protests, whether it's publishing his name in the newspaper, whether it's talking to his boss or talking to the shul where he davens, to make sure that he is pretty much socially ostracized. Again, he can always move away. But again, if the rabbis are on top of it, they can follow his movements and let every shul knows where this guy goes that he's a no-goodnik. The marriage didn't work out. We're sorry to hear that. So let her go. And if not, then it'll be very uncomfortable for you. Again, it's a very fine line between coercion and encouragement, put it that way. Because coercion, you have a problem. You can't receive a get bal korcha. You can't give a get if you're forced to do it. It has to be of your own free will. So as the Rambam says, and it's a beautiful language, makinoso ach yomer rotzani. You don't necessarily have to beat him to say, okay, I'll do it willingly, but you can encourage him to do it willingly, and this hopefully will resolve these problems, because there's nothing worse than a woman who is able to get remarried but not allowed to because she didn't get a get. And there are, unfortunately, a few cases like that. Yes, Nathan.
I'm sorry, but I turned in late, so the question I have may have been answered. But suppose a man does not want to be married to his wife any longer. Does she give him a get, or
No,
they wait for him to get out?
Yeah, if he doesn't want to get married any longer, he has to give her a get.
Oh, I see. So she has to accept it.
She has to accept. Yeah, and the Gemara has a lot of interesting situation of if you give her the get in her hand, it's one thing. If you send her a letter, what do you call it? Registered mail with the get, that's also good. She signs the receipt. If you throw the get into her Dalet Amos, it's okay. But again, the man has to institute the divorce. Again, there are certain things you can't change. It's a psukim in the Torah. The nosad biyada. He has to give it literally into her hand. But the rabbis try to make it as conducive as possible so the woman doesn't suffer and be in aguna. And that's why you have the Rabbeinu Gershom, and you needed very, very broad shoulders to do what he did and to do what Rabbeinu Tam suggests. There's a wonderful book, and I'll just conclude with this. A lovely, lovely book. Came out in the 40s, I think, 50s, by Professor Louis Finkelstein, called Jewish Life in Medieval Europe, where he goes through all the manuscripts of all the takonos hakahilos, the communal ordinances issued by great rabbis throughout the Middle Ages that formed the basis of Jewish life, including Rabbeinu Gershon, Rabbeinu Tam, because they would get together once or twice a year and issue major rulings that affected the entire continent. And these became law. Yeah, there were those in Ashkenazi communities, and there were separate ones in Spain, mostly in Ashkenazi. But Jewish Life in Medieval Europe by Louis Finkelstein. It's a wonderful book. It has all the original documents in translation with notes. It's an excellent book to show the power of the rabbis, because and this is a topic for some other time, rabbis have a great deal of power to influence how Jewish law is interpreted. To the extent that they utilize this power measures the greatness of the rabbis. Some rabbis were very courageous in some of the things for Rabbeinu Tam to say that you can only have one wife, it goes against the Bible. For Rabbeinu Gershon to say you can't divorce a wife against her will, that's a major innovation. The Torah doesn't say that. The Torah says you divorce her, period, whether she wants it or not. You can't do that. So there's a lot of power the rabbis have that is often not utilized. Today, there are many devices available to contemporary rabbonim and batei dinim, so that we shouldn't have the issue of agunos anymore. Unfortunately, we still have it, and I think the rabbis are perhaps derelict in not encouraging recalcitrant husbands to give their wife a divorce when the marriage is no longer viable.
But you have a prenup today.
I'm sorry?
I said we have a prenup today.
Well, the prenuptial, yeah, but unfortunately, the prenuptial agreement is not 100% foolproof, 98%, but not 100%, and not everybody signs the prenup.
Well, in our circles,
Yeah, well, I know when my children got married, I said, listen, if you want me to be Masada Kedushin, this is what you got to do. And they signed. One of my sons-in-law is an attorney, and he had some questions about some of the wording in the prenup. So I put him in touch with Rabbi Willig, and they worked out a few modifications in language, and he signed it. Fine, not a problem. But the prenuptial agreement is, I would say, 98% effective. But not everybody, especially those in the right-wing camp, even though it was sanctioned by many Gedolei Yisrael in Eretz Yisrael and here as well, there are some in the yeshiva world and the Hasidic world who would not sign the prenuptial agreement. And that's where the problems reside. Without a prenup, and they don't want to give the wife a divorce, they want to hold out for money or something else, or custody. I mean, I was involved in a lawsuit last year, the year before. I was called in as an expert witness on Jewish education. There was a Satmar Chassid whose wife went totally off the derech. And, but they agreed on most things in terms of a divorce settlement. The only thing they couldn't agree on was what yeshiva to send the kid to. They agreed it had to go to a yeshiva, and it had to be an Orthodox yeshiva, but their definitions of Orthodox were very different. She was really way off. I mean, the kid's going to need therapy for the rest of his life. It's unfortunate. The kid was 3 or 4 years old, and I mean, the yeshiva had to take his tzitzis yarmulke away from him when his mother picked him up because she'd throw it in the garbage. That's how bad it was. It was a horrible case. We won the case, by the way, and the kid's in a good yeshiva, but he still spends time during the week with his mother. So that's, I say, he'll be in therapy for a very long time. It's very sad. The divorce was finalized, fine. But,
do you feel that the rabbis should go to the extent of not giving these individuals kibbudim and aliyos and shuls?
Absolutely. If a guy does not want to give a get, then you don't count him in a minion, and you certainly don't give him kibbudim. Definitely, and this should be done, and the rabbis have that authority. In general, they have a lot of authority that they don't use. And they should be more proactive, especially when a woman's life is involved. If she's a young woman and her whole life is ahead of her, why shouldn't she be able to get remarried? It's a big problem. So,
Wally,
yes.
why do the courts allow, when you have a case like you just talked about, this husband, and the wife goes totally off the derrick? The kids now are from, why do the courts give that mother joint custody for, when it comes to, it's a religious matter?
Yeah.
And you said
No, the courts don't get involved in that. Other than the get law, the courts will not get involved in religious issues.
Courts always favor the mother.
yeah, but the kids are religious today.
Again, in this particular case that I was very involved with, that kid is going to be, the kid is now 4.5, 5 years old. He's so messed up. He loves Shabbos with his father, and he's, where he sits in his yarmulke and he's singing to Biros, and he loves it. Then he goes to his mother, and I just hope he doesn't eat treif. It's a horrible situation where the mother is, and it's interesting. It's just parenthetically, I should mention this. The father was represented by a frum law firm, which is how they got to me, and the mother was represented for free by what I call a white shoe law firm in New York. It's not the expression, white shoe, a very prestigious law firm in New York City. And they came with a dozen different lawyers and associates because they knew if they won this cause, this particular case in court, there'd be a whole line of people waiting to come to their, because this was a very significant case. They lost the case. Oh, the judge ruled in favor of the husband, but if the wife had won, there would have been a whole line out the door of this firm. So they didn't charge her for this. But it's a divorce, especially when you have two different perspectives on religion. The court will generally not get involved in religious issues. And it's a very unfortunate situation because whenever there's divorce, everybody suffers, especially the kids. And if it's a difficult divorce, the kids suffer even more. Who do you side with, mommy or daddy? And there have been times when I've been asked, I had a dentist. Where was I? When I was in Florida, I had a dentist who was in the middle of a divorce. And the mother was a parent in the school as well, both parents in school. So when I go to the dentist and my mouth is open and I can't say a word, he's telling me all the things about her. Now, when I see the mother in school, she tells me all the things about him. And the bottom line is, it's the kid who suffers. And this always happens. And hopefully we should go forth and marriages should be successful and we should not have too many divorces. And if we do, they should be amicable. Any other questions?
Harley,
Yes.
do they still teach Gittin before Kedushin?
Do they still what?
Teach Gittin before Kedushin.
Well, it's not a question of teaching Gittin before. The question is, in the order of Shas, why does Masechta Gittin come before Kedushin? And the classic answer is because they give the refuah before the makam. Well, that's just a joke. But if you want to know why Gittin comes before Kedushin, you take a look at the Igeris Rav Shira Gaon, who discusses why the order of the Masechtas is where you are. And the Rambam has it in his Hakdama as well. Okay, have a great day, everybody. Stay warm out there. It's chilly. Good to see you, Ari.
Rabbi.
Have a good day, Janusz.
You too. Nice to see you, Ari. Hello. Hello.
Goodbye, goodbye.
Rabbi Saina Varech. Yishem Nevarach Me'atov Yad Olah. B'shuz Kol B'suben Kan. Varech Shechal Mishalo. Rosh Chal Mishalo. Tevok Hayinu. Unosin Lechem V'chol Basar Kilam Chasto. Us Tuvo Hagadol Tamilo. Tivla Kol Mechin Mazon Chol B'Yosov Hashem Bara. Baruch Ato Adonai Hazon Es HaKol. No Del. Baruch atah Adonai al haaretz v'al hamazon. Uvenei Yerushalayim Ira Kodesh Mewa v'Yameinu Baruch atah Adonai b'nei beracham b'av Yerushalayim. Amen. Umikol tov v'olam ha'yichasreinu. We got a new customer today. My son Ari joined us today.
Yeah.
First time I've seen him.
Dina told me to send him the email, so
Oh, yeah?
so I sent it out.
First time I saw him. Yeah.
He was on, actually, years ago, he was on my list.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, I tell people, you want to still continue. So I tell him, you have to send me an email. So and then he fell off the
Oh, nice to
list.
see you.